Coming up on CarAdvice, in part 2 of our feature interview with General Motors Holden Director of Design, Richard Falazzo sheds more light on Holden's design role in the GM ecosystem.
The SEMA Automotive Trade Show. CarAdvice goes behind the scenes in Vegas at the world's craziest modified car show.
And test drive do's and don'ts, we share CarAdvice's hot tips to help you make the right decision when buying your next new car.
Hello, I'm Trent Nikolic. Welcome to CarAdvice. Thank you again for joining us. With me at the desk, Paul Maric. Good evening.
Hello, mate.
We've got a big show again tonight, lots to talk about, including part 2 of our interview with GM Design Director Richard Falazzo. That's a really interesting insight. I love that kind of stuff. You and I go behind the scenes at the world's craziest car show.
Yep. Where was it?
Las Vegas. Tough week in Vegas, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, what happened there can't stay there. We have to tell them about it. We're also going to show you what you should be looking for, the do's and don'ts, when you're looking at buying a new car. First of all, though, let's have a look at this Tesla autopilot study that was recently announced. It's shown that human driver reaction time is slower when we let the vehicle do the driving for us.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is
should be
bizarre.
the other way around.
You'd think so.
CAN Drive did a study based out of Canberra with the Tesla Model S and Autopilot, which is the autonomous driving mode or semi-autonomous driving mode in the Model S. And they discovered that the reaction time, which is the amount of time it takes you to detect an obstacle and go for the brakes or swerve, was slower with the autonomy feature on, and it went from 0.5 to 1.5 seconds
Big difference.
in normal time to 3.5 seconds. Yeah. And that may not seem like a lot of time, but consider that at 100 k's an hour, you're travelling at around 30 metres a second. It can be the difference between you having a serious crash and not.
Well, I think that's the interesting point, because as we just did recently in Los Angeles, you tend to use the autopilot function or that function on vehicles that have the semi-autonomy when you're on the freeway. So you're travelling faster, travelling further in the same amount of time, and travelling at a much higher speed as well. So I think that's a really interesting point. And we also noticed that even for people like us that drive all the time, and we're actively testing vehicles all the time when we're driving, you still tend to switch off just that little bit when you let the vehicle drive itself. So we set the Tesla Model 3 that we drove into autonomous mode, and you tend to converse a little bit more with your passenger, look around you, maybe mess around with the audio system or change radio stations, look in your mirrors. You're not actually watching as closely what's happening in front of you, are you?
Yeah, that's true. And there's some caveats here, though. I mean, 30 people were in this study. It's not exactly groundbreaking. Yeah. And also, in the future, these cars will not have to worry about obstacles. We're putting this in a theoretical situation here that the car will never actually be in. So I'll be keen to see how this evolves and whether it actually does become an issue in the future.
As we keep saying, interesting times ahead with autonomy in general. Now, Mazda recently announced a $27 million loss, and that's for Q2 of this year. So that's a huge amount of money. I mean, if that was to continue, that'd be $60, $70, $80 million by the end of the year. So $27 million for Q2 is a huge loss. However, it's not just on the surface, bad business decisions by Mazda. It's a lot bigger story than that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was flooding at Hiroshima. It's where their plant is. 44,000 units couldn't be produced. And that's around 10% of production. So it is a huge amount of cars that haven't come out. That's obviously resulted in a profit loss. But it also means down the track for Mazda's big investments in the US, they've also been delayed. So it is bad news in the sense that you're not getting the cars, but it's also bad news in the flow-on effect of that money that would have gone elsewhere.
Well, you might be sitting at home now thinking, okay, Mazda's lost some money. What does that matter for me as a consumer? The reality is that this money then can't be spent on R&D moving forward. And Mazda is a particularly specific case study because certainly in Australia, everything they've touched in the last 5 to 10 years has been amazing, really. Mazda 3, Mazda 6, CX-5 segment leader in that most competitive medium SUV segment. This kind of thing isn't unprecedented, though. We've seen it happen before with floods in Thailand, which obviously affected production of all the dual cab utes. We've seen it with the Hiroshima nuclear power plant, Fukushima, sorry, not Hiroshima, nuclear power plant, which then had a flow-on effect for all the other manufacturers in Japan. So it's not unprecedented, but Mazda will have to work hard to gather back some of that ground, won't they?
Yeah, and let's put it into perspective. While they have a whole bunch of new models at the moment, now's the time they're working on future models. So if you can't spend as much in R&D, it could affect what the new models look like, the new features they have. So it'll be interesting times ahead, and hopefully Mazda will be able to rebound from this.
I think we're going to see a little bit about what Mazda's made of in the next few years. Another announcement that is a big point of contention for us at CarAdvice, we've had a lot of focus on it over the last 12 months or so. Takata airbags. By now, everybody out there should know about the dangers associated with the Alpha Takata airbags and the reasons why. What's happened most recently, though, is that the Queensland government has announced that it will start to issue defect notices for vehicles fitted with those airbags that haven't been replaced.
Slow clap.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about time someone did something.
Yeah, that's it.
Queensland's first for once.
Yeah.
And it's good because there's over 2,000 cars on Queensland roads that still have the Alpha airbags. And the Alpha airbags are the dangerous ones.
Yeah.
There's a 50% chance you'll be killed if one goes off in a car crash.
It's no laughing matter. No
insane.
laughing matter at all.
And if you're not killed, you could be seriously injured. And we've seen some horrific injuries from people that have been in incredibly minor accidents where an airbag's gone off and they're damaged for life. So ismyairbagsafe.com.au is where you go to find out whether your car's affected. Please do that if you haven't done that already, and caradvice.com for the rest of the Takata airbag news. Last week, we had the chance to chat with GM Australia Design Chief Richard Filazzo, and he gave us a real cool insight into design here in Australia. And this is a bloke that's been designing Commodores since the VN.
Absolutely. This is a really important year for Holden. You know, in Australia, 70th anniversary this year. It's a big deal. Richard had a lot to say about that kind of stuff and where they're going, what they're doing. So here are some more fascinating insights.
Despite the fact that manufacturing has ended in Australia, engineering and certainly design is still running and still doing quite successfully. What's it like here at the moment? What are you guys up to, and how busy are you doing designs for GM globally?
Yeah, we've always been busy and continue to be busy. Sure, it's sad that manufacturing doesn't occur in Australia anymore, but we continue with the design and engineering. And I can say that, you know, Australia, not just Holden, but all the manufacturers here, punch above our weight in terms of automotive design and engineering, mainly because it goes back to the very beginning. Australians are a pretty good early adopters, and when cars first turned up on the turn of the century, Holden and other brands were straight into it. And we have 1 century of skill sets in design engineering imparted over that time. So we actually know what we're doing, and it's a very valuable commodity. So engineering and design will continue here in Australia. We'll do it for the world, and the products will come back to us with a Holden badge on it.
Fantastic. A question for you, a bit of a curveball. In your office, I noticed you have a few car models, and some of them aren't Holden or GM products. If you were to exclude all the GM World cars, is there a car on the market at the moment that you really like the look of and you think is a nice sort of design that that is sort of setting a new trend in automotive?
A car on the market at the moment?
Yeah.
Gosh, you're putting me under the pump here now. I like what Mercedes has done in reinventing. You know, 10, 15 years ago, they're looking a bit boxy and probably not as appealing. But I like the way they've reinvented. Some of the French stuff as well, some of the Renault work I rather like. But the French have always pushed the boundaries a little bit, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think those two tend to pop out. There's a lot of great cars on the road. There's so many manufacturers, and styling is the main differentiator now.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about interiors? I mean, interiors, I guess they were kind of fixed in the sense that you had to have a screen here and buttons here and stuff like that. Are you seeing changes in the way that interior designs are taking place?
Sure. Probably more so interior than exterior. And the exterior, the main enablers there are LED lighting. That's changed things. But the rest of it is form. Interiors changed dramatically. I remember when I was doing interiors years ago, the more buttons, the better. It said this is a well-equipped vehicle. And now it's fewer buttons, it's large screens. So screens have changed our lives in so many ways. Our telephones, our computers, and cars are exactly the same. So it's all menu-driven, and the challenge for designers is to make it intuitive nonetheless. With fewer buttons, you need to run through a menu. So designers need to think about how people interact with it, which is what we call, you know, human-machine interface, HMI.
Yeah, right. And what about electric cars? With electric cars, there's less of a demand for cooling, more of a demand for aerodynamics. Are you having to factor that into designs for future electric products?
Yeah, sure. Electric cars will change the shape of vehicles. And that's good for designers because we're always looking for a new proportion. That's what gives a designer something new to work with. But people think that there's no cooling required on electric cars, but it's not quite true. The batteries get very, very hot. And they do need cooling, so they still need a grill and a radiator. It might be hidden underneath or somewhere, but it does still need cooling. And it will change the configuration. So like I said, it's an enabler for a new proportion.
This is a bit of a get smart building with doors and secret passages and stuff. Why is it so secretive in here? I mean, is there a reason that it's so hard to access this place and there's barely any windows to the outside world?
It might seem contradictory in some ways that we are very, very secure in the studio space, but then we do show cars and put them out in the public. But they serve two different purposes. Certainly internally, when we're working on a future product, this is your competitive advantage. Yep. You don't want your competitors to know what you're doing. Even though it takes a few years to design a vehicle, it does help with their strategies. So that's what we want to protect. But then when we do show cars, it's a different thing. We'll go further than the next stage. It's beyond that. Yep. And that's where a car company will mark its territory. It says, we're doing this. This is the flavour of our brand. You guys can do something else.
Do you take feedback from the public on a concept car and see the things that work and then potentially lead that into the production model?
Sure. You've just touched on the main reason for doing it. Yes, it's a way of exploring and expressing our ideas, but the main reason for concept cars is to showcase technology and showcase styling trends, and you get that feedback. So if you get a positive feedback, clearly that's a direction you can set. And bearing in mind that we need to shock people a little bit. If they're too comfortable with it, it's too old already. You need a little bit of shock value. And the ideal response is, wow, there's something cool about that. I'm not sure I'm ready for it yet, but I really like it. Fabulous. If we hear that, we love it. And if you need an example of value of a show car, let's go back to 1969 of the Holden Hurricane.
Yep.
That vehicle had rear view camera, digital instrumentation, climate control, all the things that we take for granted on an entry-level vehicle today. In 1969, they weren't available. So it's by exploring through concepts that you put the idea into the heads of people and your own organisation, and you start to explore and you find the solution.
Yeah, and one of the most famous ones that I can remember, and still it stands out, is the Effigy. And I think to me that was one of the most beautiful cars, and it was kind of funny because it was a new concept but based on like that older design. I mean, where did the inspiration for something like that come from?
Well, the inspiration was simple. It was to pay homage to the FJ Holden, which is why it's Effigy. It's a contrived name. The 53 Holden was just ubiquitous in Australia, and we wanted to pay homage to it on its 50th anniversary. We didn't quite make it. It was a couple of years later, but we were working on it around its 50th. And it was pure fun. It was to showcase a lot of technology which is embedded in that retro style, if you dig a little bit deeper. But it took the DNA of that car and completely transformed it into a slinky coupe, which is wide and low and very dramatic, from a humble little sedan. And it was also to say to Australians, look, we can be very proud of the industry we have, and that, like I said before, we punch above our weight in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard Filazzo, thank you so much for your time. How cool is that place? I love it. I mean, it is top secret. You're never allowed to go in there, and the fact that we're able to do a tour through, see some of the cars they've designed, it has awesome history to it.
It really does, and what a bonus for Holden having a guy with Richard's passion there. Really important job that he has, and someone that's been with the brand for that long. I think it's good times ahead for an iconic Australian brand. SEMA 2018, Paul, the Specialty Equipment Market Association. I'm going to go out there on a limb. Please don't push me off it. I've got enough problems as it is. This is the best car show anywhere in the world.
SEMA is huge. And to put this into perspective, it's an aftermarket show where everyone and their dog comes along to showcase their aftermarket parts. And the size is incredible. The Paris Motor Show, which is the biggest motor show in the world, 78,000 square metres of show space. SEMA, we're talking about 112,000 square metres. We walk 20 Ks a day, and it's split across several halls. We have manufacturers in one hall, we have hot rods and performance cars, tyres, off-road, and then an outdoor section where they're burning tyres up all day.
Exactly. Now, we're going to try and break this down a little bit to make it easier for you to understand. So you can go to CarAdvice.com and have a look at all these individual videos if you like. But first up, let's have a look at the manufacturers. So I spent some time there with Kia. The big deal for Kia was they'd shipped a fully operational Queensland Police patrol vehicle there, right-hand drive, fully set up. They had to get approval from the Queensland Government and Queensland Police to put it on display. They were showcasing that to show the world that the Kia can actually be used as a police car. So I thought that was pretty cool. They'd also given a Forte, which is what we call a Cerato, to Red Bull, which had been turned into a drift car. Why not?
Yeah, cool.
Add a Stinger V6 and twin-turbo engine under the bonnet, exhaust through the bonnet, and you've got a pretty crazy recipe for a drift car. But I think for me, with Kia, and you'll talk about the other manufacturers now, but with Kia, I think that shows that, they embrace the aftermarket, they get out there and they modify their cars. So tell us about Toyota.
Okay, let's run through these. So Toyota was all about Supra. So they had every generation of Supra there, all the way through to the brand new Supra, the A90, and it looks incredible.
hang on.
No, they haven't actually revealed it yet.
It wasn't there.
Just
so this was like
different.
the 300th time, but they hadn't shown anyone.
Toyota, what is going on here?
Where is the Supra?
They have announced it is coming to Detroit Motor Show, but we still don't know what it looks like. Yeah. They gave Corolla 5 of them to some tuners to come up with their bespoke version of a Corolla. These were so cool.
Which was your favourite?
Like the 700 kilowatt Corolla. Yeah. But my actual favourite was the Hoonigan car. So they had a car that had a Russian arm on it. It was a camera car. It looks sensational. So very cool setup.
Really cool setup. I think Chevrolet, for me, the highlight with Chevy was all the crate motors. Yep. They had crate motors for everything. Mopar had a crate motor that you saw.
1,000 horsepower. They call it the Helephant. How cool are these names?
Unbelievable.
Power Stroke, Helephant.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just cool. And on top of that, Chev as well, diverse range of cars there, everything from Bolt to Blazer to Colorado ZR2, Silverado, and a new electric green coloured Camaro, which of course we now get in Australia.
And just quickly before we wrap up the manufacturers, Ford, they had a bunch of Mustangs, as you'd expect, but also Ranger that we're familiar with.
4 versions of the Ranger, that is coming soon to the United States. Honda had a whole stack of race cars there. Hyundai had the Veloster Turbo, which looked cool, and a Santa Fe that was towing a Veloster to the racetrack. So Lexus as well, the ES with wine cooler in the back. How cool is this show?
Yeah, genteel Lexus drivers. The next hall we'll take a look at is the wheel and tyre hall. So you switch focus, you go from the one where all the manufacturers are and go to one that's just full of wheels and tyres. Now, every man and their dog was there, as you said, showcasing all their tyres. A lot of brands we've never heard of. Chinese brands of tyres, yeah. Some of them you might not want to hear of. But all the brands that we do know, so Toyo, Firestone, Bridgestone, Continental, all of those guys. I think the most interesting part about that hall for me was watching all the demonstrations of tyres being fitted, because, you know, there were stupid big 32-inch wheels and what have you, but there were actually tyre technicians there fitting tyres to wheels.
So cool. And this is where it's heading. It's all about automation now. And I was amazed with some of these pieces of equipment. They're all spotless. Every tyre shop I've gone to, it's like a grease basket. So it was cool to see these things working. They were doing live welding demonstrations. It is all about showcasing a product so that the 70-odd thousand buyers can come and have a look at it.
Now, I'm a little biased, obviously, because I love muscle cars, I love performance cars, I love that kind of thing. That hall for me is amazing. We could talk about that all day, but a couple of quick highlights. There was a Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, so the old 50s car. You can see that in our video on CarAdvice.com. I've been waiting for someone to comment on it. No one has. It's actually fiberglass. It's not a real one. Thank God, because when we looked at it in the flesh, we thought, why would you chop that thing up?
It's on the article, How to Kill Resale.
Exactly. Worth $1 million, scratch half of it out. It's beautiful workmanship, though, and it's not a real one, so don't panic. Our other highlight there was Jonathan Ward from a company called Icon 4x4 has started a series of vehicles he builds called Derelict. So what they are is rusty old cars. In this case, it was a 49 Mercury, and what he'd done is converted it to Tesla electric running gear.
So cool.
It's unbelievable. So it looks like a 49 Mercury with a whole bunch of surface rust and fade, but it's got completely up-to-date drivetrains. Lastly, and I think probably most relevant, Paul, for Australian audiences, is the off-road and four-wheel drive hall. We spent a fair bit of time in there, and the reason we did that is because of all the great Australian companies we saw in there.
Oh, and it's good to see Australia represented on the global stage. And these are companies like ARB that you hear of in Australia and think, oh, it's just an Australian company.
Exactly.
But when you go to SEMA and they have a line around the corner for people to come and check out their newest gear, you realise how serious the business is for international buyers and sellers at a show like SEMA. And then it goes on to all sorts of different manufacturers that are there selling other off-road parts.
Yeah, so among the Australian names we saw there, as well as ARB, we saw TJM, which were, impressive to see them there, Red Arc Battery Management, Patriot Campers, although I couldn't find a Jeep Wrangler. Did you manage to see a Jeep Wrangler?
Oh, the Jeep Wrangler is like the staple.
6,000 of them.
It is incredible. We don't see that many in Australia, but the Yanks love a Wrangler and modifying it. The amount of stuff you can get, even with Mopar, the official aftermarket arm of Jeep, you can order anything for your Wrangler and make it go anywhere.
So another SEMA done and dusted, an amazing show. Go to caradvice.com to check out all of our coverage. But for us, absolutely, the highlight was Australian companies representing themselves on the global stage. One of the most common questions we get at caradvice.com, one of the most common things that's asked on any of the radio shows that we've done, and now correspondence to this show, is all about, quite obviously, buying a new car, because we're called Car Advice. So there's no surprise there. Yeah, exactly. What a strange question. However, we've got a couple of really important things that we expect people to follow. And we say to people, this is what you should do when you're going to look at a new car. The first one that people will have heard us speak about a lot if they've listened to our radio show, you say it all the time, mate, 24-hour test drive. Now, why do you suggest that?
Because the last time I spent $60,000 on something, I didn't take it for a 5-minute drive around the block.
Exactly.
You need to be confident that the car that you're spending money on is the car that you want. This is the second biggest investment you're going to make after a house, and you want to make sure it's the right one. So the whole purpose of a 24-hour test drive is to take it home, make sure your other half likes the car if they're not with you, make sure it fits at home. I had a friend of mine who bought a Pathfinder, the new one, and it didn't fit in the garage.
That's a bit of a
What's the point in that?
And I think, look, extrapolating on that 24-hour test drive element, it's about the time that you spend in a car, because it's really easy when you get in a car at a dealership and you've got the sales guy breathing down your neck, and we're not having a go at sales guys, that's their job, that's what they have to do. But if they're sitting in the back seat and you're driving around the block for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, there's a whole bunch of things about that car that you might not notice. Did you pair your mobile phone with it? Did you take the time to set the seats and the mirrors up where you want them? Did you work out all the storage space? Did you find out, you know, if you're a lady and you're test driving the car and say you've got your mobile phone in your handbag on the test drive, is there anywhere in the car to store the mobile phone? You won't notice that until you then take your phone out of your handbag and go, okay, I haven't even got a little storage shelf. So I think that key message is all about time spent with the vehicle, which allows you to then find out all those other little things that become evident. Now, you mentioned your mate who bought the Pathfinder. Once you get it home on that 24-hour test drive, there's some other things that you should be doing. Let's run through those.
Okay, so are you towing? If you're towing, you want to make sure that the car will tow with your trailer. Because again, there's no point getting a big SUV or something that's totally asthmatic with your 3-ton caravan. So when you do take it home, make sure the car has a tow bar, the test car that you're using, and make sure it will tow the way that you want it to tow. Get the kids in the car as well, make sure the baby seats fit. A lot of people may buy a 3-row SUV assuming they can fit baby seats in the 3rd row. You want to check this stuff out before you commit to the purchase.
Also, all the tethering points, you know, how the baby seat attaches into the seat mechanism itself. And then further to that too, if you're quite tall and you move the front seats back, do you even have room for the baby seat in that 2nd row as well?
Yeah, people will jump at something like a Mazda CX-3, get a kid, go throw the seat in and go, oh, the seat doesn't fit. Neither does the kid. So you want to make sure these things are all covered off. Now, what about the technicalities? When you do pick up a car, the more expensive they get, the more forms you're going to have to sign, and be prepared to be up for an insurance excess. And this isn't them trying to stitch you up. It just says that if you do take the car home and you go and stack it into something that you're going to cover the excess.
Yeah, or someone runs into you. It's not unreasonable at all. Just back to what you were saying there too about the baby seats and how you use the interior of the car. A luggage area, the space where you put your bags and the sports gear and the kids' sports gear and all that kind of stuff, something that really often gets overlooked. It's something that people ask us all the time. I'm looking at a Mazda CX-5. I'm comparing it to a Honda CR-V, for example. We say to someone, well, if you need the space, you go with the CR-V. So if you have the option of having the vehicle at home with you, load the luggage space up as well. See if you've got room in there for all that kind of thing. Now, the other thing that we'd recommend people do at the dealer is bargain for a better deal. Now, that might sound obvious, but it's not just about the money. It's about all the other extras too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got brands like BMW, Mercedes, Audi. They will sell you a prepaid service package. So that means that instead of paying per service, you're able to lock in servicing over 3-5 years. So BMW, for example, you can spend $1,500, prepay servicing for 5 years, and away you go. If you head over to a brand like Volvo, some of their servicing is quite a lot more expensive. So don't get tied up too much in the car and then not look at all the additional costs. If you can package all of this in with your purchase price, it means you don't need to worry about it down the track, and there's no nasty surprises when you come in for your first service.
And look, the other thing too is the dealers will want to look after you with this kind of thing as well, because they want you to keep the relationship with them. So as I'm saying, don't just think about it as the price of the car. Factor in everything else as well. There are extras too, you know, the floor mats, the window tints, all that kind of stuff. If they'll throw those in for free, all well and good. But on top of that, I'd be bargaining for a longer warranty. There's no harm, you know, if a manufacturer's got a 3-year warranty, tell them that you'll do the deal if they make it 5 years. See what they say. No harm in asking. And then, as you said with the servicing, if they don't have a cap price servicing scheme, which most manufacturers do, I would then ask them if you can factor that in the beginning.
And we're keen for your tips. Do you have anything that has worked the last time you bought a new car? Advice at caradvice.com.au. Let us know, because we always cross-reference these with dealers, and what we find is that most dealers are willing to do a 24-hour test drive, as long as you pay like a non-refundable deposit and you're keen to give it a proper shot and you're not just a tyre kicker. But yeah, if you have any other ideas, let us know because we're keen to hear them all.
That's all we've got time for this evening. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Trent.
Join us again next week, 7:30 p.m. on Your Money.